So when you first open up Navisworks, what you want to do is a lot of people tend to first they just want to open up. I'm actually going to move these onto my desktop real quick. They want to just go in and click on the file itself and open it up, and they'll do that for all 4 of them. But that's not what you want to do. So what you first want to do is you want to have Navisworks open, okay, and it's going to be just a blank, fresh screen. And from here, you're going to want to go to the Home and the Append button. So instead of going to Open like most people would, when we first build a Navisworks file, we want to append each file in, and then once we're done and we've got that saved, then we can just open the file and continue to work out of it. But every new file we want to add on to our existing file. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go Append, and your screen won't look like that. That's for the software here. And then go to your wherever you saved it. I just saved it on my desktop. Okay, you can actually do all of them at the same time. Hit Open, and they will bring them in on top of each other. Okay. So once we've brought these in, okay, you'll notice that we have 2 models that are higher than each other. Okay, I will wait. This is all being recorded too, just so you know, so you can go back. Let me know when you guys are good to go.
On Citrix.
Yeah.
See those downloads. If that makes sense. So download them on your computer.
Okay, I'm gonna keep going here, just for sake of time, because we have a lot we gotta cover tonight. So you first bring those in. You'll notice that one's on top of each other. Okay, and does anybody know has anybody looked at a structural drawing before in the class?
Things and
it's actually so when I say the site has to be at, like, let's say 90 degrees. Now, if you don't have any of these menus anywhere on your screen, sometimes if you're running a 2-screen setup, you'll have one that the View tab, Windows, the section tree set up right now, and we want to utilize this for the purpose of this specific assignment. And the reason why we want to see our selection tree is this tells us what files we have in Navisworks, like loaded into our program, and what we don't have loaded in our program. So right now I've got my mechanical, my architectural, my plumbing, and my structural. Okay, and if you notice, this is higher. So one thing you can do to check your elevations is you can right click on the file that you're wanting to search, go to Units and Transforms. So you're going to right click, go down, Units and Transform, click that, and here on your origins, it will tell you different numbers. So conveniently, this one is 100 feet up in the air. So we just change that down to 0 and hit Enter, and it will now align my structural model to my architectural model. As long as all those units and transforms are the same throughout each file, they will align if they were exported on the correct coordinate system, which we'll get into next week after the presentations. But does that make sense what I just did there? I don't have you guys in the class to nod at me, so if I could get some verbal answers.
Could you do it one more time, Austin?
Yeah, yep. I'll just put it back up there. A clash by a foot or two, and then a project that it can see. So if you click on here and it zooms straight into your project, one, that's a pretty good indicator that everything's loaded in on top of each other. If it didn't, you'd have something that looks like here, hide and select, it's right on top of it. I would just do that with all of them. I know my architecture's there because I can see. Whatever you do to find it, you want to get it pulled up, okay? And I'm gonna be on one screen. I would recommend that you throw this off to another screen if you're working on multiple monitors, just to save space, and you can kind of get a bigger picture of everything, because sometimes this can get pretty hectic in here. So what we want to do now is we are going to do an add test, okay? So by adding a test, this allows us to basically choose between the 2 files what I want to run and how I want to run it. So for every time that you want to run a report, you want to involve a new test, okay? Now I'm going to show you guys basically the easiest way to do this. I do it a little bit differently at work with rules. You can kind of come in here and turn these on and turn these off. We won't worry about those. We're just going to come in here with a base Clash set, okay? The first step is we want to rename it. You want to come in here, and I believe on the assignment it asks for I think it's 4 different tests. So one would be mechanical. We'll start off with mechanical versus structural. So we'll just name it mechanical versus structural. Okay. You can abbreviate these. Now, one thing, and we've talked briefly about a BIM execution plan in this class. A BIM execution plan is basically a contract for BIM for the whole project. The owner, the subcontractors, what they're legally held to doing, and what their scope of work is basically for BIM. Now, in the BIM execution plan, it will spell out exactly how we need files named. We need clash detection names ran. Everything is spelled out a specific way because we have filters and rules set in place to help us further along that process and just make our lives easier. So on the final, just like on a BIM execution plan, if you were the subcontractor and you were to upload the wrong file with the wrong file name, I would email you back and ask you to resubmit it with the correct name. But in this class, if you turn it into the wrong file, you lose points because it's part of the instructions. So on the final specifically, I'm a little bit lenient on just normal assignments. But on the file specifically, you need to look out for naming conventions because they do catch you up, and you want to make sure that those are all there. That's probably the #1 reason why people don't get complete 100% on the final, is they'll do everything right, and then they just won't have the correct naming convention. So, for example, I would tell you, name your clash detection or your clash batch name this. And so, for example, if it said mechanical versus structural, I would want it to say word for word what I have it in the instructions. So for now, we're just going to say mech versus struct, okay, mechanical versus structural. And now I want to go down a little bit here, and I have a standard A section and a standard B section. Now we won't get into this too much. But in here, you can actually run different clash reports. So we're just going to do a standard. But properties, for example, is I can go into the properties of each item that I want to clash to kind of do a more thorough clash detection and not necessarily such a broad scale. So for example, if I was dealing with structure and they had web joisting, I could just run a clash with mechanical versus my web structural, or just my columns, or just my beams, or I could really fine tooth my clash to be suited for what I want it to be. But for this case, we're just dealing with our standard selection. Okay, so first you click the one you want to start with, and the other in A, and then the second one in B. So this case, mechanical, structural. The order doesn't really matter as long as one's structure and one's mechanical. The order doesn't matter. The only reason it would be if it showed up yellow or and I'll show you that yellow, or it'll be red or green depending on if it's in A or B, and that'll make sense here in a minute when I show that. But we got mechanical versus structural. Okay, now in here in the settings we have two things. We have a clearance and a tolerance, and in that clearance we have a hard clearance, a hard conservative, and then duplicates. Usually the only two that we use are hard and clearance. Now a hard clash would mean, okay, I'm not going super in depth on BIM. I don't want to have as tight of tolerances. I want to give them a little bit of leeway. So I'm going to give them a ½ inch or a quarter of an inch tolerance. Basically that means if, for example, I don't know if we have, I'll just fly down in here real quick. Get up in the space here. Okay, so this copper line right here, for example, if it was only a quarter of an inch into the structural steel, it would be okay. It would call it good. And usually you'd only do that in instances for insulation would be like the #1 reason that you would do some sort of a hard tolerance, just so you don't have a billion insulation clashes. But that would be an example of a hard. Now a clearance type, which is shown right here, so settings type clearance, this would be if I had fire protection or fireproofing on my structural steel. So a lot of the times in the specs, it will call out, blown in fire insulation 2 inches thick, or certain beams throughout the project will be have certain fire rating on them. So we'll have a certain thickness of fire, not proofing, but fire retardant foam that you'd want to avoid. So what we do is we put a 2-inch tolerance on our clash detection for structural steel. So we can basically put in a pretend layer of that fireproofing foam. Any questions on that? But that all comes from the specs, right? So you'd have 2 inches in enter. So mechanical, structural, 1 inch, and I say enter. If you can hit run test too, it does the same thing, and it will pop you to a results tab, and it will give you a number of clashes. So I have 123. Sometimes you'll have 100, 120, 125. As long as you're in the right ballpark of where I'm at, you're going to be good to go. Now, if you were to have 0, that's a big red flag of 0. Or if you had like 5,000, that'd be kind of a red flag. But right now we're at a rough ballpark of 123, so not that many. Okay. Now in here, this is where I specifically like to do something as a coordinator. Some people do, some people don't. But this is personally what I like to do, and that is running groups. So by grouping, so if you notice, I can click on my clashes, and it will take you, or I can arrow, and it will take me one by one through all of my clashes. Okay, I can say here I can go through all 123 of them one by one, and I can assign them to people to fix. Now, a lot of the times you'll have one run of duct run through an entire length of beam, and it will count that one clash as like 10, 15 clashes because it's running through multiple elements of a model. So what I like to do is I actually like to group all my clashes together and look at it as like an overall clash kind of view. So what I do is I click on my first clash, and scroll down to my bottom, and I'm gonna, I'm gonna shift click on my bottom one, and it's gonna highlight all of them. Okay, so I'll do that one more time. I'm gonna come in here, click on my first one, scroll down, hold down shift, and click again, and it's gonna highlight all of them. When that is done, you can either come up here to new group, or you can right click and group them. I personally like to right click and group them. I don't think that this new group works all the time personally, so I like to right click and group them. So now you'll notice when I click on my group, it shows me all the clashes at once. So I can come in here and just view all of them at the same time. Okay. Is everybody still with me?
Yep.
Okay. Let's see, hold on. Get a message. Oh, that's outstanding. Okay. These are all of my outstanding clashes that I have left. So before I can sign an area off, all of my clashes have to be done and approved by me before we can sign off or move on from that area. So right now I have a list of outstanding clashes, which are basically, these are all the remaining clashes that I have in my model that we still need to review. So I come in here, outstanding. Now, if you come over to the right-hand side, next to that, you'll see a menu over here. If you click hide other, that will hide everything that's clashing. Everything that is not clashing, it hides, and it keeps everything that's actually clashing. Dim other shows you the clashes in color, and everything else kind of grayed out like this. So you can kind of get an idea of what's still around you, but see clearly what my clash is. So I can still see, okay, I got a duct here, but I got some extra content right here. And then highlighting, you can turn these on. This is what I meant by the green and red. If you did structural first, it would show red or green. It just flip-flop the colors. Okay, so I usually don't leave these on. I usually turn them off. I don't like them personally. And then obviously hide other shows them. But now we want to go through and do any sort of what we determine to be non-issue clashes. So clashes that don't really affect coordination. And for example, on this one specifically, it would be our slabs. So what I like to do is I go through and I do a visual check first. I run through each clash and I kind of pick at them and say, okay, is this one, is it actually an issue? Do I need to take this to the design team, the engineers, the architect, and say, hey, we need to make some adjustments here, or is it going to be something that they can fix in the